Welcome into Floyd Street's finest. He is Holy Cross head coach Mark Lieberman. I'm Jack Grossman. This is Floyd Street's finest. And coach, hope you've been well, man. Always glad that we do our weekly podcast together. But first, I gotta ask you, season's starting soon, right? Man, it's gotta be starting this week. How's the
Yeah,
team?
we
Is the team ready?
we'll have an exhibition game Saturday, and then there'll be a reaction pod after that about all the mistakes and errors that were made, including coaching gaffes. And please feel free to rip as much as you need to, as it's a work in progress. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
That's good. Where's the stream so I can watch it down here?
Let me find out about that. Now our games are on ES locally. They're on. I guess that would be streamed. I don't know. We're on ESPN Radio locally.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, like 680 is going to broadcast our games. So yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. Who's doing the play-by-play, just out of curiosity?
Max Abels.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, how about that, huh?
That's awesome. That'll
Big
be a
time.
lot of fun. That'll be a lot
Coach
of fun.
Steve
Yeah.
Rummage running the show, doing some good things. So
What's Rummage like in practice?
man, he's great. He really is. He's I'll tell you, as people think, he's got such a good way about him. He's great with people. And in this business, in coaching, no matter what, the X's and O's, of course, it's vital for everything. But you got to have a way with people. He is so good with the kids. He's good with everybody else, but he has a way of just carrying himself that's relatable, that's nourishing. You know, is a big, strong guy as he is. He bonds really well with the kids, which is great.
That's awesome. I know every staff has a good cop and a bad cop. Something tells me Rummage is probably the good cop, right?
To an extent, yes. Listen, I'm always
Yeah.
I enjoy the black hat, so that's always what I enjoy wherever I've been.
I love Steve, man. He's perfect for that role. It's awesome. But
Yes.
but we do need to get into Louisville, Tennessee. Before we do anything else, Coach, I know you weren't on last week, but we've chatted about it. You did radio, I did radio. I went all in, so I got to raise my hand
Yeah, you shoved all your chips
yeah,
in.
I shoved all my chips in there and I got to eat it. And you
Yeah.
know what? I'm going to own it. I'm not going to back away from it. I said Louisville was going to beat Tennessee, and I went all absolutely. I did it on the podcast. I did it on, radio hits with Ennis. I went all the way in, and man, that could not have
You
backfired.
got busted.
anymore.
You got busted. That's how it works. That's how it works, And now you get another bankroll and you go at it again. You build it up again. But
Exactly.
look, Jack, I get it. And I was talking about it. I said, look, some of the stuff they've been doing with transfer and their effort, their energy defensively, they're doing some good things. And then, you watch the game and offensively, the biggest thing, Jack, was I just felt that they were pushed off spots. And when you start your offense, they're predicated on high post touches and DHOs and into zooms and creativity and so on. And when every cut is bumped and it's contested and every pass is contested and you're starting the offense 4 or 5 inches away from where you're used to, it makes a difference. It means a big is going to have to dribble and take 2 extra dribbles, or the cuts are going to be longer, the passing lanes are extended, and that's where deflections come in and those type of things. So yeah, Tennessee really took them out of the groove.
Yeah, they did. And it was right at the start, too. I mean, they smacked them, and I felt like Louisville never found their footing after that start. Because, you look at first 6 possessions. Louisville had 4 turnovers in the first 6
exactly.
possessions. Yeah, it was just right off the bat, down 10-0, took all the air out of the center, which was hyped and just ready to explode there with all the people in the building. And I really thought, because number one, I hadn't been impressed with Tennessee so far. I hadn't seen that level of defensive intensity carry out throughout a game that they were able to do on Saturday against Louisville. So that's kind of some of where my thought process was going from, that maybe it's not a typical Rick Barnes defensive team. That was completely proven wrong on Saturday as well. But Louisville, I thought, would be mentally tougher than they were in this game, and physically tougher, to where you knew Tennessee was going to give that early push of they were going to try to physically take over the game early. And I think where I was disappointed in Louisville was that they never really tried to respond and match that physicality and be able to find any sort of rhythm on the offensive end.
Yeah, and I think it was you could talk about the toughness, you could talk about those factors, but I also think there's little things. Look, the first turnover, and you mentioned they had the amount of turnovers they had. The first play, their first possession is a turnover, and the other two possessions were a late shot clock by Terrence Edwards, a contested jump shot by Waterman and Kason Pryor. But the first possession, they go into a dribble handoff, a ram scream coming downhill for Terrence Edwards, and then the dribble handoff with Chucky Hepburn. And you have Hadley lift out of the corner, and he's lifting, and they've done such a good job in their previous games and against Moorhead, the exhibitions this summer. And knowing you can almost close your eyes, know a guy's in the corner, and you see Hadley lift up, and Hepburn's expecting him to be there. That's the first possession of the game. But also, it's a 15-6 game, and you have Kason Pryor with the steal, a good move, a drop step layup. It's 15-8. Tennessee comes back with floppy action, and you always want to force them on the single side, and that's because you have less chance of errors, less chance of having a big switch out. You almost don't let him out to the double side, but he went to double side. Rain Smith got caught on the screen, and you see Corian Johnson over help on that first pass, and Ziegler does a great job of spacing away. They skip it to him, and he has an open three. Now it becomes, instead of 15-8, you get a stop. It's 18-8. So, you just saw little things defensively showing out on some of the pin downs that Tennessee were running with the bigs, swiping. There were some retreats and backpedaling by the bigs. The guards were not. It's one thing, you got to dodge and defeat some of the screens. So those are little things too, and that's where you could call it toughness. But even from a technical standpoint, there was some slippage by Louisville on both ends of the floor. And again, when that happens, Jack, then offensively you feel rushed. You're looking for 15-point plays. So all of a sudden you're not as patient. You're going to just, because Louisville's shown that patient, getting the best shot for Louisville, not the best shot for individuals. And then all of a sudden you're starting to get some forced shots.
It was a perfect storm from Tennessee from the standpoint of they were able to make it a half-court basketball game because like Louisville loves to play with that pace that we've seen so far this year, but they were able to keep them in the half-court, keep them for the most part out of transition. But at the same time, they used that pressure. They used the fact they were able to, as you said, push the Louisville offense out on the perimeter to where even though the game was being played at a slower pace, Louisville looked so incredibly rushed on the offensive end to where, 9 of their first 10 shots were three-pointers. 18 of their first 21 shots were three-pointers. And of those 18 shots, they only made 3 of them. And yes, some of them were open looks that, they missed, but because so many other times they were turning the ball over or taking contests, as you said, late in the shot clock, three-pointers, even the open looks they were getting, it felt rushed, sped up, and absolutely uncomfortable to where I really don't think Louisville ever really got too many looks of, okay, we feel completely great and comfortable in the rhythm that we're used to getting here.
Yeah, but again, it's the overreaction, not by you, but by a lot of people, and the expectations of what this team can accomplish. Because look, the season is just starting, and there's a lot of teams that come out, and how many times we talked about where teams are in a close game, and Alabama right now struggling, and holding off Arkansas State, holding off McNeese, as talented as McNeese is. It's
like
just
North Carolina and Elon, I think, is a great one too.
Right, absolutely. So you just see it. And I think Louisville, I think they have some really good pieces. I think it's just cleaning up the fact that you almost can get lulled into, and Coach Kelsey talked about it. You get lulled, so many pats on the back. The more you're patted on the back, the bigger the head grows. And that's just normal. And everything was positive, everything was great. This is what you certainly don't want to lose at home by 22, but you can build on this from film. He talked about on his show that he watched the game 5 times, and that's what all coaches do. They're going to break down, just see all the little things and every little detail. And not playing till the 19th against Bellarmine. The biggest thing I talk about is that they have great depth. That is great now, because in practice you're going to have coaches pushing you. You're going to have pads. You're going to have everything. You're going to have a James Scott have to catch the ball, put an X on the floor, say this is where you're catching it to initiate all our offensive actions. Kason Pryor, same thing, because Tennessee was overplaying, getting deflections. Guards couldn't do that. You had to step out. Sometimes you have to give up position for possession, but that's not the case of how they want to initiate their offense. So I'm sure the physicality of the practices, all those things are going to help them as they go into their next game and get ready for the Bahamas and moving forward to play ACC teams.
Yeah, and that's really, the big theme of this. Like we're breaking down the game. We're going talk about everything that went wrong, which there was a lot. It was a 22-point game. But while we can be critical of what happened in that game, and we have been, we're going to continue to be, it's important to remember that yes, you can be negative and critical about the game, but also not declare the entire season over based off
Of
of what
course.
happened to game two. And I think we knew going into this, we talked about it all summer, all preseason, about how great of a litmus test this Tennessee game was going to be for Louisville. And we saw how far away Louisville is from where they want to be right now. But the good news is, you have, as you said, that 10-day break now to reassess absolutely everything and have it be a massive reset and establish all the physicality and things that they need to work on that you mentioned from the Tennessee game going into Bellarmine and then the Bahamas. And they have so many more chances coming up to get marquee wins. Now, they don't have a lot of time to get everything together because of the front loaded portion of the schedule with the Bahamas and Ole Miss and Kentucky and Duke and Carolina all coming before January 2nd. But you do have that opportunity now to say, okay, we had the big test early against Tennessee. Yes, you failed it, but how can you learn from this moving forward? How can you learn from the litmus test to be able to help starting with that game in the Bahamas against Indiana on the 27th?
Yeah, and that's and back to something you said earlier about Tennessee and what we saw in film. Don't think that they weren't foaming at the mouth coming into this environment and just chomping at the bit to get after it and play. And that's what Rick Barnes teams do. So, sometimes you watch the film and Louisville watch film of Tennessee against Gardner Webb, you watch film of them against Alabama and that kind of stuff. And you can almost get lulled into the fact that, okay, we can get our stuff done. They don't look as formidable as they have in the past. So that's a factor as well. But yeah, moving forward, this is something that, Coach Kelsey's his staff, they're going to ramp things up. This is almost a way to get your guys understanding, hey, we're in position now where now you almost have some doubters. And that's almost, again, you look for spins as coaches, and now you can almost flip the script where there was so much love in this town and all that kind of stuff. And it's still there. And they believe in this team. They believe in Coach Kelsey. But now you can flip that script and just be, hey, all right, people don't think that we're good enough. People don't think we're tough enough. And that's something, if I'm in that practice, that's every day. Oh, you're not tough enough, and everything is physical. And we are just, Coach Kelsey's big on some rebounding drills and some of those type of things. I'm sure it's a very physical. There's a lot of bumps and bruises. The trainer is getting ice out as much as possible for these guys so they can understand, hey, this is a war of attrition. This is one game, and it doesn't measure where we can be. Because if you come back and you beat Indiana, you beat a couple of those teams that you just talked about, all of a sudden, everything is fine.
Yeah, which again, Indiana is still very beatable. They're going to present issues in terms of, Tennessee outscored Louisville 44-10 in the paint, and
Right.
that's not very good. I want to ask you about that in a second, but Indiana is a team that's going to do everything through the paint already, so that's the biggest strength for them. So that's going to be an interesting thing. Like, how can you try to limit that type of thing on your end? But also, like, I think back to that Tennessee Indiana game, the big difference to me was because in that exhibition, Tennessee did a very similar thing to IU that did to Louisville, where they punched him in the mouth early. Uh, Louisville again had 4 turnovers in their first 6 possession. Indiana
Mm-hmm.
had 4 turnovers in their first 5. But the big difference was IU was able to settle in because one, they got out in transition some, which Louisville wasn't able to do, but also Miles Rice was so good off the dribble and in pick and roll situations to where they were able to kind of break down the Tennessee defense in a way that Louisville just couldn't, which they tried, especially in the second half, whether it be Cason Pryor or Edwards or Hadley. Just no one could really have that success. So let me ask you about this because there's not really there's not going to be, to use a Tennessee reference, there's not a Dalton Connect where you're just going to give the ball to him and say, go get us a bucket. That's not how this Louisville team's going to work. Positioning, like you've been talking about all podcasts, is going to be a very important thing. But how's Louisville, now that the quote unquote jury is out, like saying, okay, if you're over physical with them, they're going to have a hard time getting their spots, moving the ball, all that stuff. How can Louisville, because, Indiana, I don't know how good IU will be at it, to be completely honest, but Ole Miss in the no middle defense with Chris Beard, that's going to be coming. Duke, Carolina, all these other teams down the road, they can take that and try to emulate it. I don't know how good they'll be because Tennessee's as good as anyone in the country. But what can Louisville do to try to take advantage of those overplays, whether it's back doors or stuff, when they don't really have a go-to, like, hey, we know this guy's always going to be our guy where we're going to go and be able to say, get us a bucket either in an ISO or a pick and roll or something like that.
Yeah, I certainly think they have some skill. Everybody's wondering who's going to be
Right.
able to. We talked about that even before as the summer was approaching. Who's their go-to guy? Who's going to just, hey, it's a 1-4 flat or a high ball screen for a guy, late shot clock, and those type of situations. I still think they have some guys with some skill sets. And you talk about guys that can create their own shots. Look, Chucky struggled, Warren Johnson struggled. We get that. I think those guys, I just think it's all connected offensively because as you're almost, we talked about the positioning of where they were and getting into those DHOs, getting into those false actions to get those open shots. Yeah, we're not sure who's going to be that guy, but I think they have enough talent with the guys that we just mentioned that can create it, whether it's getting a post touch for Terrence Edwards, whether it's, some more actions. I just don't think they were as effective with some of their roll and replaces, which is a big action of theirs. And again, that just came down to your Coach Kelsey wants to play really fast. They want to get out and go. They weren't getting stops on the defensive end. And then when you've got to bring up the ball and then you're running something every single time, that's really not the way he wants to play. He wants to play with pace, where we're attacking and there's there's drives from the baseline and drift shots and getting paint touches, not just to create your own shot, but to create shot for others. But they're going to rely on the 3-point shot. Who's going to be that guy, Jack? I can't sit there. When I'm watching a practice every day, I'm like, all right, well, this guy's getting better. This is the guy who can do it. And we're going to have to see, honestly, going into next week, all right, this guy is, we've seen it this summer, but I don't think we can get a true test till they go against the Blue Bloods, the Indianas, the Dukes, the Carolinas about, all right, this guy is able to create. This guy's bending his back, getting low, is able to snake a ball screen or get in there and create shots. I still think they have enough talent to do it, whether it's Corum, whether it's Chucky, whether it's Terrence Edwards, some of those guys. Hadley could put the ball on the floor a little bit. So we'll see. They're going to still play through their bigs. I think that's kind of their identity. But it's too early to say, okay, well, this is the guy that's going to just, hey, he can go get one.
Right, because and also it needs to be said. I mean, Chucky Hepburn and Corin Johnson, they didn't have the easiest assignment with Zakai Ziegler guarding him. I mean, Ziegler is, I would argue, a top 2, top 3 perimeter defender in the sport, along with DeJuan Harris of Kansas. And, Chucky Hepburn is obviously up there as well. Well, to where that's a very difficult assignment. I don't know if they'll face a guy that can get into your grill and really get up under you as well as Zakai Ziegler can. And that was, to be honest, that was the most Zakai Ziegler game I've ever seen him play in terms of the impact he had defensively, just really taking Louisville out of so much actions and being, we talk about with Chucky Hepburn a lot so far in the exhibition season, the Morehead State game, of how he takes, he takes the head off the snake. That was Zakai Ziegler in that game doing it to Louisville. Then on the other end, he has 11 turnovers and 7 assists. Like, that's insane. But then he's also he's hitting jumpers all over the place. He had the backbreaker 27-footer that kind of, Louisville was at 9, had a little bit of momentum. That was kind of their chance. He gets that 3 and just, suck the air out of everything. Tennessee won a 22-5 tear at that point. Completely.
Yeah, people think that was. I still think I saw some slippage where, yeah, that was a big shot, but I just don't know if Louisville was going to be able to guard their actions continually throughout the game. Everybody's talked about, well, that shot was the backbreaker. I think there was just so many times where, were they going to be able to get some kills and so on. But you talk about Tennessee and with Ziegler, because the biggest thing is how unselfish they are defensively. Every time there's guys in gaps, there's guys swiping, there's length, even on ball screens, on the dribble handoffs. They're wide, they're long, they're active, their hands are active, they're getting deflections. And that's the biggest thing. They're so connected defensively, Tennessee. And you weren't the only one. Just quite a few people were like, well, this isn't your typical Tennessee team defensively. And they showed that, hey,
we were proven wrong.
We still have it. Yes.
I want to ask this because I mentioned it earlier. 44-10 in the paint. And on the rebounding, Tennessee out-rebounded Louisville by 14.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2 stats where I go like, okay, where could Louisville struggle? Because the whole theory is U of L is going to have, and this was really true for Kentucky on Tuesday night for a while also in the Champions Classic game. The most stunning thing about that was, Duke outscored Kentucky 28-6 in the paint in the first half. Then in the second half, Kentucky was actually +2, 20-18. That was one of the more stunning things that happened in that game when Kentucky was able to win. But kind of the issue facing both these teams, at least what it seemed like going before UK was kind of able to fix some things and really be able to They played through the high post with Andrew Carr, got some guys moving and cutting some easy buckets that way to where they were able to find some points around the rim without just going straight one-on-one, which was impressive. But how much does it worry you, Louisville getting hammered so much in the paint and on the glass? And I know you said Pat Kelsey loves his rebounding drills, but those are going to be two areas where I think Louisville's going to be battling all year to just try to tread water in.
Well, sometimes there's a couple things. And the first thing is offensively, when you get offensive rebounds, it's when you anticipate shots that you've worked on in practice that you expect guys to take. I think there was some actions where it was one pass and a shot from Louisville, and you don't have guys anticipating. They've done such a great job up to this game of getting offensive rebounds and being active and anticipating where their shots are going to come from. Some of these were just out of rhythm for what Louisville wanted to do. On the defensive end as well, you look at where Tennessee was getting. You talk about paint touches. I mean, Chaz Lanier was coming off curls, was getting shots in the lane. Louisville was leaving their feet on shot fakes, so Tennessee was able to create. And now you've got a team scrambling. And when you do that, when you've got teams having to react and scramble and cover and do all those different things, then it takes you off bodies, and that leads to an opportunity for a second chance rebound, for defensive rebounds as well. But from the offensive end, I mean, Tennessee was getting putbacks because you had to have help. You had to have big guys come off bodies and so on, and that gives up second shots. They ran the floor. They had some turnovers for touchdowns as well. They're able to score off of that. I think it's a sample size of where, okay, Louisville was not taking the best shots for them. They were taking the best shots for some guys individually. And on the defensive end, there was some slippage and there were some situations where they were scrambling, and that leads for Tennessee to get offensive rebounds as well. And they were efficient shots. So Tennessee was very efficient, where Louisville wasn't as efficient offensively. And so Tennessee has that rebounding margin. So, yeah, those are things just to all clean up. And that's something, look, as a coach, you don't stay the way you are. You're not going to stay the same. If you want to be a winning team, then you're going to develop those habits. You're going to get better at all those things. No team stays the same. They either regress or progress. So this team, I believe, is going to progress and is going to get better at some of those things and understand what's at stake. You have veteran guys. You have great leadership. So I think that's going to morph into a team that's going to understand how to win, because you don't stay the same. So the conversation you and I are going to have a month from now, 2 months from now, is going to be completely different, because teams don't stay the same. And I don't think this team is going to descend. I think it's going to be on the uprise on a lot of factors.
Right, I'm with you. I mean, like, that's a game where on Saturday Tennessee missed 23 shots, they rebounded 12 of them, like over 50%.
And if you look at those,
like
watching the film of it,
a lot of putbacks.
Right, there's putbacks because you have guys out of position where you just don't want that. You want to stay attached, especially on bigs, to get bodies on bodies. And there were some blow-bys. And Traore got blown by 3 times in the first half, and I'm like, that's a guy that's got to dig in and have that mindset. Not tonight. I'm keeping guys in front of me, and those are things I'm sure the coaches are challenging him and challenging everybody. Stay down, be the second off the floor. You saw that a lot. Cason Pryor on the perimeter on some switch outs. He was leaving his feet on a shot fake. That brings another body over, an extra pass. And if it's a miss, you get second chance opportunities.
What are some things then that you're going to be looking at? I know Louisville has that 10-day break now, but when they come back against Bellarmine, what are some things that you're going to be able to see and say, okay, this isn't just happening because, no offense to Bellarmine, which we know Scotty D is going to have a very, very well-coached team that's going to present a unique challenge with the way they play offense. But Louisville physically should be able to be in a much better place than where they were in the Tennessee game. What are some things that you're looking at to say, okay, they're progressing here, or they still need more work on it?
Yeah, it's such a different dynamic because Bellarmine is such a different opponent than what you've seen before. They're not contesting some of your cuts. They're playing off. They're going to make you take jump shots. They're shrinking gaps. They just don't want to keep you the way Tennessee is.
They want to try to stay in front of you.
You're right. They're not doing the things that Tennessee does. So it's not a great way of saying, okay, we're comparing and contrasting how they played. You just want to make sure that you're efficient. You really are. They're going to give them statistics as far as with turnovers, with how our pace of play. I think it's going to go back to just, again, developing that identity, because it's apples and oranges with that. I think it's just getting your team in the mindset of, okay, we've got to be real efficient. Now, the good part about that is what we talked about on the defensive end, because with how Bellarmine plays off the high post, whether they split off the post, the chin actions, all that kind of stuff, they post guards, all those type of things, that's going to present a different type of test for Louisville than what they had to do with Tennessee. So I think that's going to be a really big nice challenge for them. And I'm sure what we just talked about, staying down, no second shots, long rebounds, all the things that you preach from a defensive standpoint that are non-negotiables. I think that's what you want to see against Bellarmine.
Right, because Bellarmine's incredibly disciplined. They're going to move the ball really well. It's going to be a great passing game to watch for both of these teams, but it's definitely a team that is going to you need to be disciplined to defend Bellarmine on
Oh,
on that end of
absolutely.
the floor.
Oh no, you've got
Yeah.
to watch. It's a situation where right every cut, the way they pass the ball, they set great shuffle screens, which is diagonal screens for their guys. They come off it. Their spacing is great. So yeah, it's a completely different challenge, but it's great for these guys to be locked in, no matter what they're doing schematically, to understand those type of things.
It's
My
definitely
daughter,
going.
my daughter wants to make an appearance on the show, so here you go. Say hi, Emery.
Hi, Emery.
She's a big basketball fan too. So more softball. Okay.
More softball.
We always have guest stars on
yeah.
this on our podcast, Jack.
What position does Emery play?
She's a pitcher and she's all over right field. She's played some infield. She's a big fan of the polar bear with the Mets too.
Hell
So,
yeah.
yes.
Do you think he's going to re-sign with the Mets?
Don't tell her that yet. She didn't know that he's a free agent.
See,
the polar bear. She doesn't know about that yet. But we're gonna go to Citi Field next year for a Mets game. So next summer, yeah.
Hell yeah! I mean, I'm a Cubs fan, so I wouldn't mind seeing him go down to the Windy City. Right. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, very.
Sorry to take you off point there, Jack. But what we talked about with Bellarmine, it's just a completely different type of narrative of what you're trying to do. But systematically, what Louisville wants to do with shrinking gaps, ball pressure, blitzing, switching, and all that kind of stuff. And Coach Kelsey even talked about it. They've got to get better at their ball screen coverage, because you saw it even in Tennessee game. There was a blitz up top. Traore was late tagging, and that caused a foul in the first half. And taking those cheat steps towards a ball screen, anticipating it, understanding two places at once. Those are all things. I don't care who your opponent is, Jack. That's what you have to be good at.
Let me ask you this, because we're about a week into the college basketball season now. We've had Kansas, North Carolina, Champions Classic on Tuesday night with Kentucky, Duke, Kansas, Michigan State, Houston, Auburn, Baylor, Arkansas, Baylor, Gonzaga, where Gonzaga won that game by about 40 points. Very, very early. But who's kind of stood out to you on a national landscape so far?
Yeah, just Auburn going into Houston was just, and I watched that game, especially with all the drama going before that. That was just.
Have you ever heard of anything about a fight on a plane and having to land the plane?
I've heard about fights on the plane. I haven't heard where they had to turn the plane around and land it. So trust me, I've heard about all kinds of stories. That have been around this business a long time. I've heard quite a few things.
Is there anything you don't need to share names or who you're with or anything, but have you witnessed anything like that?
I've witnessed something where we had to de-escalate a situation. Yes.
On the plane.
On the plane. But we didn't have to turn the plane around. It was handled. But I'll tell you this, the fact that they do that, and I'm sure from a betting standpoint, I'm sure the line just jumped up for everybody on Houston. And then I watched that game, and you just watched Auburn go out there and just out Houston.
Yeah.
With everything. It was incredible to watch. That's why with Bruce Pearl, man, those teams, I mean, don't ever underestimate his teams, man. Just like last year, Alabama making that run, Auburn has the pieces that they can do some damage. And I still think Kansas, watching North Carolina game, watching the Champions Classic, they're formidable. Duke is so talented. I think it was a situation where I talked about this on the radio today. I don't think there was adjustments. I don't think there was all these things that Mark Pope pulled out of his the hat and said, wow, we did. I think you talked about with Carr and Williams, they got them the ball around the post because Duke was so worried, because in the second half, there was so much action of screening and slips where Duke's was not communicating, because you're talking about a lot of young players. And I just think they wore down, and Kentucky had men who actually are in great shape, understood, they have the depth. And I think it was just a situation where they wore them down. But Duke is so talented. If they can just stay healthy, stay in. And obviously, if I'm in that situation, we're just running for 3 days and just getting our guys. Talked about cramping, talking about all that. I think Duke is, from an individual standpoint, they're just loaded.
They are. They are. I mean, and I really think it's hard to tell the full scale of that game without mentioning that Malua, the big guy, I keep forgetting. I can't pronounce his name
That's okay.
correctly.
You know
But
me with names. I can't do that.
but I mean, he went down with the cramping issue, 12:48 left in the second
Mm-hmm.
half. Duke was up 9 at that point.
Correct.
When he comes back into the game, it's tied. Kentucky outscored Duke 20-11 in that stretch, and that really, I thought, kind of changed the scope of the game. It kind of took away Duke's size advantage. Now, credit to Kentucky, once he was able to come back in, they were still able to do a lot of that stuff on the offensive end, with the slips, and Andrew Carr was able to get into the lane a couple times. Brandon Garrison had a really nice stretch
Mm-hmm.
for them to
Williams
where
is
they
great. Look, they're not fronting, and that's something too. But you could see he didn't have lift and
yeah.
so on, and you're just backing guys in and able to score, and guys are staying home because Kentucky shoots the ball so well. But it's also a situation where young players just don't know how to talk really well, don't know how to communicate, don't know how to switch properly, and so you have a situation where they're so much worried about being back cut, they're so worried about my man not scoring, so they're staying attached and they're not digging and swiping. And you saw Kentucky; they were solid defensively. They really were in the second half. And that's also a war of attrition because they wore down a Duke team. I don't think there was anything, we talk about that all the time, the adjustments. And I went through this today on the V show. You talk about adjustments at halftime, it's 15 minutes. You have a coach's interview. The players are getting rested. The coaches talk and scream and do all that kind of stuff with each other. They look at the stat sheets. You got to give the head coach some optimism. Then you go in and talk to the players for about 3 or 4 minutes. Then you're back on the floor. And yes, we'll say, well, maybe we're going to deny him a little bit more. Maybe we're going to switch this screen. But those are things you've always worked on. So it's not like you go into the game and there's these huge adjustments. I just think Kentucky wore down Duke. You talked about cramps that the Duke players had. I just think it was a situation where they had some grit. And it wasn't, you see in the second half, they get a second chance opportunity. They grab a rebound. Guy goes to the floor, gets an out of bounds play, another missed shot. They get a second chance, a third chance. A wide open three. And that's not coaching. That's not an adjustment. And it really is coaching. It's something you've worked on throughout the summer and the offseason about your guys understanding how to compete. And you find competitors. And it's recruiting. Get guys who can fit what you want. So there's not major adjustments. It was just Kentucky doing what they did really well throughout the second half and not having slippage, not being offensive sensitive, meaning a lot of players, and you see that even in Duke, there was some times you miss a shot, you might look at the ref, you might look at the bench, especially with young players. And then your first 3 steps, you're not getting back. And now all of a sudden you have a Kentucky guy, Carr, running the floor, getting a 3-point play just because you're sensitive on the offensive end. Kentucky didn't have that. They kept playing.
Yeah, those are things that, especially when you're a younger team, you're more prone to those types of things. You're more prone to, not be able to, because you're being told 3-point shooter, 3-point shooter, 3-point shooter, 3-point shooter. You want to stick next to the guy so that you don't give up the open three.
Absolutely.
Then you end up
Absolutely.
giving up driving lanes and cutting lanes. And those are all things, by the way, that can be advantageous for Louisville in the future in matchups as well, whether it be maybe not necessarily Duke, but in a lot of these other games that they're playing to where it's going to be drilled so much. You got to stay out the 3-point shooter. You got to stay out the 3-point shooter. If you have guys that can, back cut or slip screens, you're going to be able to get some easy buckets off that as well. Back to Auburn for a minute, though. Tahad Pettiford, he balled out for them on Saturday night.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure
if they
did.
could get that type of, obviously he's not going to be that damn elite every time out there, you would think, but I mean, if you get him, you got Miles Kelly, JB Pegues. They didn't even get great games from those dudes. Janai Broom is a All-American who's on about his 14th year in college between his time at Auburn and Moorhead. I'm not worried about Houston. I mean, LJ Cryer didn't shoot the ball great. Emmanuel Sharp
they'll be fine. Look,
they'll be fine. I think they're still a legit Final Four contender. But Auburn scored over 1.3 points per possession in the second half against the Houston defense. Teams don't do that against Houston. Like
that's the
that
thing
was
that's always scary
impressive.
about Bruce Pearl's teams is like they have such freedom offensively, and they just play so hard. You could say what you want about Bruce Pearl. His teams compete and they play hard. And when they're efficient like that offensively, and they're in a rhythm, I mean, they're tough to beat, man. I just think that's a dark horse Final Four team for me, for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean they're Ken Palm #1 now, so
Well, I
they're
mean, I was saying before that,
yeah,
right?
no,
But
no,
now,
I agree. I
now,
agree with
yeah.
you. I agree with you. I was saying that in support of you saying that, to
Thank you,
where
Jack. I
yes,
appreciate the support.
I want to ask about Kansas too, because you mentioned them. I mean,
Hmm.
Dickinson's great. I mean, I saw them in person as well in the Champions Classic on Tuesday night, which they should have that at Atlanta. Says the guy that lives in Atlanta every year. I enjoyed that, but
You and John
but
Fanta look great. Great pick.
thanks.
Yeah. That was going around the ESPN studio today. Everybody was just like, doppelgangers, twinsies,
Yeah.
all kinds
It's
of. Someone's
funny.
going to create a meme. Phil Baker's
I,
going to create a meme for you or something.
Yeah, all thanks on that one go out to Kevin Sweeney of Sports Illustrated because the three of us were talking probably for like 5, 6, 7 minutes just before the game, and Kevin was like, "You guys got to get a photo together." I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right. That would be good." So yes, I've had fun with that for sure. I've got a lot of texts and stuff, of a lot of jokes there, but Kansas Dickinson is a beast. And I thought in the Michigan State game, they were just every time they needed a big bucket, they got one, whether it be Hunter or
Mm-hmm.
DeJuan Harris or KJ Adams, they're able to get one. But I still worry. Like they're a lot deeper than they were last year. And Zeke Mayo is a really good shooter. He won great shooting the ball on Tuesday night. He was phenomenal against Carolina last Friday.
Mm-hmm. Sure was.
AJ Stewart is a pure scorer, but was only 32% from three last year. I still worry about the fact that DeJuan Harris isn't, while he shot a good percentage, he's not going to shoot a high volume of threes. Hunter Dickinson can shoot threes, but he's at his best when he's around the basket. KJ Adams isn't going to shoot threes, and AJ
No.
Stewart is not a great 3-point shooter. Those four dudes are going to be in the game a lot together, especially in crunch time when games are decided. Again, Zeke Mayo, really good shooter. Ryan Griffin, really proven shooter. They're deeper than they were last year, but those four dudes on the floor together, does the floor spacing worry you at all with that setup, especially you know with Adams and Harris on the floor
Yeah,
together in hard
that's a
stretches?
that's a great point. Somewhat because of they don't stretch it, but they're so efficient, and he runs such good stuff, and they know who they are, they know where they're going to get their points from. You talked about Adams. He's great, just with that little push shot and the hook and around the basket, and especially with the high lows that they run. That still, as long as Self has been coaching,
He
their
loves the high
twists,
low.
their twists, and all the different things they do out of horns, all the different things they do to just create 4 round 1 and create that space. I mean, they're efficient and they'll have enough, and they really defend pretty well. And I think you make a point. They're not going to be the team that's in vogue now with stretching the floor and shooting the threes, and that's become all the rage. They're still a team that's very, very efficient, and they know who they are, just like a Houston knows who they are. So both those teams, to me, I'm not too worried about Kansas.
Yeah, the other team that kind of knows who they are is Alabama, and they haven't really
Well, it's a
been
yes.
tested yet. Yeah, they do play. I mean, the McNeese State game, that was kind of what you were expecting. Their McNeese is a really, really good mid-major team with Will Wade and those guys, and they were able to kind of grind them. That's why I was watching that game at work, and I turned to a buddy. It was like it's halftime. It's like it feels like here's why Alabama's not fair. McNeese has defended them about as well as you can defend them. Mark Sears took 3 total
Mm-hmm.
shots in the first half, and they still
Mm-hmm.
scored 41 points
Right.
by halftime. It's like I don't know what you're supposed to do with the team. This is a team that still is missing Chris Youngblood. They have some injuries. I think when they come back, Sears is
They're
the
gonna, yeah.
great.
Sears is
Sears
tremendous. Yeah,
is
like you
awesome.
saw it last year what
Yeah.
he did. He put them on his back, and some of those other guys. They're so long, they're so athletic, and they shoot the ball so well. And the way they just get out and go, and they're much better defensively than people give them credit for. So I think again, just the Alabamas, the Auburns. I mean, the SEC.
Yeah.
It's Kentucky. The SEC is going to be fun this
I
year,
think the SEC might be the best conference in the country this year. It might.
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree with
which
that.
is I feel like they're kind of taking the crown from the Big 12,
The
who's
Big
kind of had
12, right?
it.
Yes.
And I'd say the Big 12 such. I mean, they got like 4 or 5 teams in the top 10,
Look,
but
Iowa State is Iowa State. They're gonna just that's like going to the dentist playing them. So you just they're just so good defensively. But man, the SEC, you've got some really talented teams. You've got some really good NBA prospects. So it's
yeah.
I'll tell you what though, it's going to be a fun year for college basketball.
Absolutely. I'll say this on Alabama's defense. Cliff Omarui from Rutgers has been one of the best
That was
interior
a
big
yeah.
men for years. And that was the big knock on them last year was
Mm-hmm.
that without
Have
Charles
a
Bediako, really not having that rim protection to
rim
really defend
protection
the way
is
Nate
yeah.
Oates wants to defend. When they've
Mm-hmm.
had their best teams, the offense gets all the glitz and glamour. But you think about 2021 when they won the SEC, it was Herb Jones and that defense. You think about
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, the number one overall seed in the tournament. It was, yes, the offense, but they were also a top 10, top five defense at Ken Palm. When Nate Oates has his best teams, they defend as well.
Well,
And
that's
with
the
Omarui,
biggest
they're
thing.
going to be much, much better on that end of
What
the
they
floor.
like to do is really press up. They force you to drive. They want to
Yeah.
force you into that
And
because of the
drive straight
way
into a shot blocker.
exactly, and that's how they run off. Oates has been teaching that since his high school days. He wants to get that block once guys swarm to the ball, and then we're sprinting out and swarming out and going. So that's a big thing for them. They don't want you to grind out. They were going to force you to play at a speed that you don't like and get to the drive them and get those shot blocks and get out and run off that. And that's the way they've always played. And having a guy like him is a huge factor for him for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing is, even if you have games where the three ball isn't falling, Sears can get to the rim. I mean, we talked about with Louisville, like, who's going to be that playmaking guy with Kentucky, like that may be some question marks. With Alabama, if the threes aren't falling,
You have a go-to
one,
guy. Yeah.
you got the go-to guy in Mark Sears. Two, Chris Youngblood's a guy. Once he comes back, that's room as well. So is Aiden Holloway a little bit, former five-star guard who was at Auburn. But Sears is the dude you can put the ball in his hand, say, "Go get us a basket." And because Alabama, like Louisville, Kentucky, have so many shooters, you can't just sell out on trying to take him away because you're going to leave someone open. He's such a gifted passer on that end, also.
Absolutely.
And if you keep giving Alabama wide open threes, guess what? They're going to eventually make him. Just like if you keep giving Louisville or Kentucky wide open threes, they got so many good shooters on those teams, they're eventually going to make them.
Yep. No question.
All right. Well, that's about all I got here, Coach. Coach, obviously, Louisville on the 10-day break now. We'll probably come back sometime middle to late next week, I would assume, after the Bellarmine game when, there's a fresh set of tape to really dissect. But Coach, always appreciate the time. Again, Floyd Street's finest, part of the Field of 68 podcast network. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, however you're listening to this. He's at Coach Lieberman on Twitter. I'm at Jack Grossman 97. One of these days, I'll actually remember to do this at the start of the podcast, but but not today. Coach, always appreciate the time,
Same.
man. And we'll catch you next week on